Okay.
For the opening of our Joseph Norman
Got it.
show,
Thank you.
which will be on view until April 16th, 2023. So you have plenty of time to come back and see it again and again and again. This is really a very special opening because Joseph Norman is here this evening. And he will be with us for a few days, so it's really a treat. It's also very special because we have artist Bob Dilworth with us, and RISD professor Dr. Christopher Robertson.
Yay!
A lot of talent in the house this evening. I would also like to introduce another artist who is with us, Orlando Almanza. Can you just wave or stand up?
Orlando, my wife is from the town where he was born.
Orlando is our October Artist in Residence. And our museum started our Artist in Residence program right before COVID. So we had to postpone it for 2 years. And we have funding for 3 artists. And Orlando is our 3rd. And he hails from Havana, Cuba. And if you want to see some of his amazing painting, and also he is a printmaker, and very enthusiastic and excited about what he's seen here this evening. He has a dedicated studio in our museum school, and it's amazing work. So Orlando, welcome. And I would ask you to all join us 2 weeks from tonight, 5 p.m. to 7. Orlando will be in conversation with myself and some others and talk about his work and his inspiration and Cuba and lots of other things. So I would be remiss if I did not thank our amazing museum staff and volunteers for all they do and everything that they do so fabulously. So thank all of them. And thank the Chaz A. and Lois H. Miller Foundation, who helped us fund this exhibition and the related program. So thank you. I'm not sure if this mic has phone, but is this yours? Yeah. Oh, I'm handing the show over to Francine Weiss, Dr. Francine Weiss.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Laura. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I'm just going to say a few words about the exhibition, which I'm so glad we're able to do this and have Joseph Norman here, along with our other panelists. The idea for this show came to me actually 6 years ago when I started this position, because when you're a new curator, you're going through storage, you're like, oh, what do we have? And I saw these incredible lithographs and paintings by Joseph Norman in storage, and I was like, these have to come out of storage and I need to do something in the future with them. So I was really excited by that. And then we were in the darkest period of the pandemic and lockdown, and we were doing Zoom talks, and we invited Joseph Norman to do a Zoom talk with us, and it was fantastic. And he showed his new work, and I was like, so if I do that show, it's gonna have to have, you know, collection work and some of the newer things he's working on, which some of which are in this room you're in right now. I also have to fess up that I might have had an ulterior motive, which was we had 3 really gorgeous triptych pieces in storage that were little, you know, in sheets. And I knew if I did a solo show, I could frame them large and show them in this gallery. So they're all around us, really. So it's possible we're all just here because I wanted to do that. But I'm glad I did it. And of course, I really want to thank Joseph Norman for even making the work. People forget to thank artists. We work so much with objects. I will say that one of the things I love about my job is getting to work with living artists. It was such a joy to work with you. You're just such a really brilliant, very literary, and really kind person. And I think I can say you're probably more of a landline person, but Joe would call me from the desk, and you're like, Joe's on the line for you. And I pick it up, and I'm like, everyone clear the schedule. We have some topics to discuss. Some were art related, and many were not. I would like to thank all the people who donated Joseph Norman's work to the collection, which is why we can have this show. And those people are Dr. Joseph A. Chazen, Betsy Messenger, Barry and Kathleen Bittner, Cheryl Robert Nystrom, and Dr. George Constantine Meyer and his wife Dagmar was also here with us. And I'm really honored to get to introduce our esteemed panelists. I'm so glad to be up here with them. First off, Joseph Norman, our artist, was born in Chicago in 1957 as the fifth of 6 children to parents who were the grandchildren of slaves. After earning his MA at the University of Illinois and an MFA at the University of Cincinnati in 1986, he moved to Rhode Island to launch his career. It was then that he began teaching exhibiting here at the Newport Art Museum. Norman is a professor of art at the Lamar Dodd School of Art at the University of Georgia, where he also served as the chairman of the Painting and Drawing Department and the founder of the Study Abroad in Latin America, Cuba, Costa Rica, Ecuador, and the Galapagos Islands. A world-class draftsman and printmaker. That's good. He has works of art in museum collections around the country, including MoMA, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, Smithsonian Institution, National Gallery of Art, MFA Boston, and Ritz Museum, among others. We also have with us tonight Dr. Christopher Roberts on the end there. Dr. Roberts has the Schiller Family Assistant Professorship in Race and Art and Design and is an Assistant Professor of Theory and History of Art and Design and Experimental Foundation Studies at RISD. Dr. Roberts earned a PhD in Anthropology and African American Studies from Temple University, and his work examines Black geographies of memory and forgetting with an emphasis on port cities in the U.S. that anchor the transatlantic and domestic slave trades, which were in one of those cities. His current manuscript project proposes an alternative lens through which we can unsettle the anti-Blackness and geographic imperialism inherent in monumental landscape of the U.S. Specifically, he's analyzing Confederate monuments and African burial grounds in the U.S. American South. And he also has a really long museum background, I found out, SF MoMA and other institutions. So he has a curatorial eye as well.
Great. Fantastic.
Okay, so some more promise. Last but not least, Scott Dilworth. Providence-based artist, has work in our collection, actually on view upstairs right now. He received his MFA from the School of the Arts in Chicago and his BFA from the Rhode Island School of Design. He is Professor Emeritus from the University of Rhode Island, where he also serves as Chair and Director of the Main Art Gallery and Director of Africana Studies. His residencies include the Iris Project Residency, Anderson Ranch Art Center, and the African American Master Artist in Residence Program at Northeastern University, among others. In addition to art collection here, his work is in the permanent collections of the Ritz Museum, Chicago Public Library, and the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. Thank you.
I think we can start with you.
Okay,
Yeah, do you
all right.
get your mic ready. I think it's already on.
It's on?
If it's not, you just take mine.
It's on? Yeah, okay, great. No?
It's not on.
How about now? No? Here.
We try it, and I can give you my
Here,
voice.
try it. Mine.
Oh, está bien, no?
Now it's on. Yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming. This is a very great treat for me. I have not been in the state for quite a while, and I so dearly love Newport. I think my first birth was in Chicago, and then I think I was reborn when I came to the state of Rhode Island, and when I came to Newport. I've said this many times, so it might be a little boring for some of you out there, but I first felt fully and completely as an American citizen when I moved to the state of Rhode Island and the city of Newport, and by extension Providence and some other places. That I've always been treated extremely well here, and have always, as Martin Luther King had hoped for, been judged by the content of my character and not the color of my skin. And so I'm deeply grateful to each of you in the state of Rhode Island and the city of Newport for being my extended family. So thank you. I have just a bit of housekeeping I'd like to do since I might not get this chance again. I did start teaching here when I first got here. It was in the summer of '86, and so all the academic jobs were taken. And so one of my first jobs was a banquet waiter at the Hotel Viking, and Dr. Cohen and his lovely wife hired me to schlep food at banquets and things like that. Another job I had was, I think, right down the street. The school, I don't remember the name of it. I was a janitor there. It was 2 buildings. It was a junior high or something. Yes. So.
No, John.
And I know it has some nuns or something. Yeah. No, it wasn't South Bay. It was a middle school. All the above. Then my next job was actually at Salve. You know, I got a job there, and then I worked in Middletown as a framer in the basement, and I was still trying to get my bearings and footing. And then I worked at the Martin Luther King Center as the educational and, I guess, neighborhood director of something or another. And then I was eventually fired from that job. I didn't do it so well. Then I taught at Rogers High School for about a year or so. But before I get to the major collectors, and they're beyond collectors like patrons, there were some people here who literally saw my work and purchased it and wanted to just see me do well. And there were many times when I was faced as a young artist to either go sell blood or something, or that type of thing, or sell a picture. And I would call my dear friend Simone Cahill, and she would call her surgeon husband Tom and say, "Tom, we need to buy a painting from him. He's starving." And so, Dr. Cahill, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being one of my first patrons. You set my life in the right direction. When things start getting a little better, I began not having to drive my work, or as we say, schlep it across the country. And so I started working with the 2 brothers down, Bill and Tim, at Postal. And I started being able to ship my things. And so my first shipper ever is here, William Harnett. Bill, can you take a bow? So, are you here, Bill? You still here? He was here a little earlier. Well, he shipped things for me, and I greatly appreciate it. Now, there was a gallery called Du Bois Gallery, because it was on Du Bois Street. It was called Du Bois Street Gallery. And there was a very kind woman who really wanted to see me do well. Her name was Betsy Bessinger. And she had a friend named Rhodey Siegler, and there were Isabel Castellan. Those were some of the people there. And I met them at the Postal place out in Middletown, and William Harnett. Oh, there's Bill. I just talked to you. And Bill has always, when people would come in there and they say, "Do you like art?" And we say, "Yes." And you ought to meet my friend Joe Norman. He got lots of good eye. And things went from there. But Bessie Bessinger wanted to see me do well, and she purchased the work, and then in turn donated that work to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and that started things flowing. And the first curator that I really got encouraged by was a curator at the Risley Museum. She was pregnant at the time. Her name was Deborah Johnson. And Deborah, you know Deborah, she was fabulous, right?
Yeah,
and,
wonderful.
And then she later became the 20th century art critic at Providence College. But she wrote many important essays, and she was the first one to champion my work nationally and internationally. And because of her encouragement, she encouraged the Risley Museum to purchase a work from the series Patty's Little White Lies, and soon after that, the Museum of Modern Art then purchased the same piece. And so the Risley Museum did it first, and that's what's most important to me, that they recognized me, and that was a great thing to do. Coralie Gibbs, who was the former director of this institution, she encouraged me a great deal. In fact, I think sometimes she bought spaces just so I could pay rent. You know, and said, I think your class is full now, Joe, more or less. And sometimes we needed maybe 6 people and I'd have 4, and she just turned the other way and allowed these things to happen. But Allison Simon was always a very dear friend, along with Paula Herman, they were here. Allison was a curator, and she helped to shepherd the construction of the first edition to this school. Institution here at this museum. There were so many other wonderful people in the early days. Barbara and Larry Sykes, who now live in Boston, they were very great supporters. Barbara purchased my first drawing at the Boyce Gallery, my first in 1989, for $250, which helped pay the rent. And then there was a nice man who his office was right across the street. I know him as Vin or Vinny, but Vincenzo, and he was a broker, real estate broker, and I can't remember Vin's last name. Markello. Okay, yeah. And he was very kind to me and always nice. And I was at the time dating Nancy Phillips, and that's when Bouquet for Nancy came by court order and palimony. So it was really nice. Dr. Gerhard Meyer, again, he has donated a few works, and he was always a great friend. Now we move into this category of patronage, and so as my career grew, the needs and the concerns to be able to perform at that level needed, an infusion of cash. So the first major, outside of Dr. Cahill and Simone, a major collector that I met was Dr. Joseph Chazen at an exhibition held in this room entitled Rhode Island Collects Rhode Island Artists. And I was a last-minute entry because of my association with Virginia Lynch. And my association with Dr. Chazen proved to be extremely an important one, because he then introduced me to other people like Dr. Sierras and Barry and, is it Helene Hittner? Kathleen, I'm sorry, Kathleen Hittner, and some of these other people. But Joe was project-oriented, and he was a visionary. He would say, well, what is it you're trying to do? Make me understand what you're trying to do. What is it you want to do? Okay, so are you committed to this? This is what you really want to do? And he would find ways to make that happen. And I dare say, without that kind of patron, along with Diana Johnson, who introduced me to Joe. Diana, I always joke and say she was like my Gertrude Stein. I cry on her shoulder, and I remember once her husband was a banker and a lawyer, and he came in one day and she says, look, honey, these are wonderful. He says, hello, Joe, how much of this stuff do we own now? It was like that, but she helped me greatly. Now, when I needed to, two very important things. My mother was having failing health, and I just met this very dear lady who lived on the avenue, and I think I met her through Dr. Cahill and Dr. Gerhard Meyer, and her name was Jonna Chun. And Jonna said, so understand that your mother's in poor health. You need to be with her. And she gave me her place to sort of be with my mother in her final hours in Chicago. And I thought that was just one of the most magnificent and kindest things that had happened for me during that time. And it was, John, it really meant a lot to me. I want you to know. And along with Jonna was Virginia Tahern Thomas, and Virginia was very dear to me. She commissioned me many times to do portraits of her family, and as did Tom and Simone. I did a portrait of one of their sons. And Virginia was always there to give me a commission when I needed to, an infusion of cash or I needed to travel somewhere. But I tell you, it really takes a village to raise an artist. And I have the best village in North America, Newport, Rhode Island.
Yay.
And other people that I'd like to thank, so I want to thank you all. I'm so sorry. Allison Simon again. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for encouraging me so many times to keep moving forward. And my dear friend Patricia, who's here today, and I would like to acknowledge her. She was really a dear friend and encouraged me a great deal in my early days. And we had so many great moments and laughs together. But this is a very magical and special place. And with that being said, I know I've missed some people, so please forgive me. It's a very emotional day for me. But, and I'd like to say to the young man in Cuba, I just told him that my first wife was from his village in Camagüey, in la provincia de Camagüey, in the ciudad de Florida. And he said yes, so I have a connection there. I was interviewed today by a very wonderful person, and they were from the Caribbean, and I said, where? And they said, Puerto Rico, and I said, I lived in Puerto Rico, and we had a very good visit about Puerto Rico. Indeed, all of this is made possible from the generosity of people who care about people. So, God bless you all, and I guess the evening can start now.
Yes.
I guess.
Over to Christopher.
Thank you.
If I may, hold on, I think we're on. All right, can you all hear me?
No.
Switches on.
It's a conspiracy against African Americans.
That happened. Yeah, when I turned this on, it happened. Okay, now it's not. Okay.
Are we good?
Yeah.
There we go.
All right,
Perfect.
so 1, 2, 3, all right.
No, here, why don't you,
Okay.
you want to take this one?
All right. I will.
Yeah, there you go. It's on.
Appreciate it. All right. Hello, everyone. All right, there we go. No, I just would first like to say that I'm really honored and humbled to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. I'd say for me personally to really participate in a dialogue that you wouldn't often get the opportunity to. So I just wanted to express gratitude for
Thank you.
that. And I think it's always interesting to follow someone's work from afar, to sort of see their practice, and also for me personally to currently be at an institution that both of these men have played a part in kind of crafting and framing in one way or another. So there's really sort of a cool intergenerational thing that's happening up here. So I just wanted to sort of name and acknowledge that. And yeah, I guess for me, thinking about like moving across generations, that's really why I wanted to start with this piece up here, and would love to just hear the both of you maybe talk about it. I was thinking about mark making, and particularly sort of this Black tradition of printmakers and visual artists. People like Waylon Jennings and Hale Woodruff kind of come to mind for me in terms of what they are attempting to do with the marks they make. And
I studied with a student of Hale Woodruff.
Really?
I did. John Howard at the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff.
So that was really where I was going to start. Was like, how do you either both like see yourselves as kind of maybe connected to, or continuing or extending that really rich tradition of Black artists, particularly Black printmakers, and the importance of mark making and the intentionality of it?
Well, I studied at two historical Black colleges, and so I can really say I got my start among Black scholars. And the first was at Wilberforce and Central State University in Ohio. And then later, where I really met my mentor, now deceased artist Terrence Corbin. But John Miller Howard was a student of Hale Woodruff. And like so many African American artists of that period, he was a very fair-skinned African-American person, and he had won a prestigious show in Little Rock called the Delta Show. And at that time, this is in the 40s, you would have to crate your work up and ship it to the exhibition. Well, he was declared the winner of the show, but when he showed up to claim the prize at the opening, they had to rearrange some things, and they said that, I'm sorry, there's been a mistake. And for several decades, this thing went not corrected. Finally, in the late 70s, there was an investment firm in Little Rock called Stevens Investment Firm. You might recall they were tied up with the Bill Clinton Whitewater thing in real estate. Anyway, but I don't think they had anything to do with it. That was a Bill thing. But anyway, they were there. But they then made the Little Rock Arts Center make the correction. So they paid him for the work, and then they purchased several of his other works. And at that time, I guess it was maybe $24,000, $25,000 in the 70s. And he had never had that much money in his hand at one time, but he was a student of, Hale Woodruff, yeah. And I knew Lois Mailou Jones as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lois. Well, first of all, welcome everyone. And I really am honored to share the stage with Chris Roberts and Joe Norman. I think this is a momentous occasion. It is just incredible. So I'm really sort of feeling the excitement of this. Mark making, I guess this was your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know, mark making is something that I have been very much involved in my work. I think one of the things that I have been thinking about as Joe was talking, and as we were sitting here listening to his stories. Joe and I met. First of all, let me start there before get there. Joe and I met in the early '90s. I think Joe had just finished a stint at Brown University, sabbatical replacement position. I was coming into, I don't think the same position, but it was a different
And I was
position.
moving on to RISD.
And you were moving on to RISD, and I think that was just before you were heading to Georgia. I think you went to Georgia after that.
Yeah.
But we met, and I thought, here's this guy. He's an incredible guy. I really want to get to know him. But here we are, sort of like drifting as two ships, sort of passing in opposite directions. And I felt like there was a loss, but then there was not a loss, because I started thinking about what his work is, and because I knew his work. I met him and I said, I want to know more about it. So I knew his work. And the other thing is that, or I should say that I studied his work. And there were friends of mine who also had posters of your Berlin series. Yeah. And I would go to their house and I go like, wait a minute, I know this guy. And they go like, Joe Norman. And so, okay, yeah, that's Joe Norman. So Joe had a presence. He had a name. And I think a real big influence
Thank you.
already. So I just wanted to say that. So it is quite an honor to be here. The whole generational thing that I think you mentioned earlier, there is a linkage. I also think of Charles White. I think of Elizabeth Catlett. There are so many others. I think of
John Wilson.
John
Biggers.
Absolutely. And Romare Bearden. I mean, we can go on and on and on and on. But I think that one of the things that we have to remember as I look at Joe's work around him, and by the way, this is an incredible show. I want to say this, but as we look, yes, thank you. This is an incredible show. But I think the real linkage is how each of those artists use art to create these incredible, impossible conversations that we still cannot have in our living rooms and over the dining table. These conversations about lynching, conversations about racism, conversations that are still very difficult. As you are creating these conversations tonight. The piece behind me that is inspired by Franz Kafka, and I want you to talk a little bit more about that, but also the piece under the screen here, which I think is really more of a personal statement, because you talk about screws and hammers and nails.
It's about an argument.
Yeah, you're talking about maybe a personal argument between two people who know each other very well, know the buttons that they can, each one.
But that's
can press
not
from.
unlike our society. We know each other. We've been here for hundreds of years. We see each other. Nobody's going anywhere.
Right.
And yet we keep compartmentalizing things and putting bandages on things instead of healing the thing and then moving on.
So these are the conversations I'd like to hear, because the artists that you mentioned, all of the artists that we're talking about, African American artists, found a way to connect their personal experiences, found a way to connect the things that they experience in their own lives and connect that to broader issues, political issues, social issues that we as a nation are experiencing. As Joe is doing here, he's taking things that he has studied, things that he has read, things that he has experienced personally, and has connected those to a much broader, to the broader issues, we might say, so that we can all have a conversation about these very hard topics.
Well, the one thing that I've always tried to do with the work is to give it a sense of poetry. One of the artists that I always greatly admired was Marc Chagall. And Chagall was able to bring poetry to his work. And I know, Johnny, you had some experience with Chagall in Chicago and with the Mosaic and some people, things like that. But I just remember looking at the Four Seasons monument that's in Chicago. And when looking at Chagall's paintings, it's hard to not see the humanity in his work. It's hard to not be moved by the veracity of the mark making and of his belief in his imagery. Matisse and Picasso remarked of Chagall that when he worked, it was as if angels were dancing in his eyes. And I believe that about the magic of art. And therefore, I never took the moniker or the label as black artist. I wanted to just be an American artist. And I know where applicable and when possible that lending your race or color or something to a situation can help benefit. But I've never pushed that. I remember Deborah Johnson asking me that very question. So how do you want me to fill this in? And I just said, American artist, but I do get that museums need to show receipts to the public. And so they have to put labels on and then do what they call cultural identifiers. And I think that, okay, that's fine, but I've just always wanted to be an American artist, and I've only thought of myself. In fact, I have always believed that wherever I am a Chicago artist. An inner city cactus planted in a bed of daffodils with no illusion of ever being mistaken for a rose. So, thank you.
Can I ask you though, because I think it is important that you are African American. I think it is important that you have a certain experience that this work springs from a place that I don't think it could not have sprung from any other artist. And so therefore I think that. Well, I understand what you're saying, because I think this is an ongoing debate among, within the African American community. Am I an African American artist, or am I an artist who happens to be African American? But I think that there is something very specific to the kinds of conversations that you create, that only you can create. And therefore, I don't think we can just dismiss your
I agree, and
background.
nor do I want that to happen, but I can only be responsible for me. And when I wake up
Yeah.
in the morning, I'm Joseph Norman, and I'm trying really hard to be the best artist I can and live the best life that I can. And I think the world is like my oyster. I think that I'm entitled to have the right to listen to the Beach Boys as well as the Temptations, you know, without being crucified for it, as I was when I was a kid. I remember a dude said, "Man, you used to be beautiful. What happened to you?" You know, and I said, "The Beach Boys, man, they can really sing." And you know, it was just I was always just a little off, you know, in that regard, you know, listening to music and. You know, I love the Righteous Brothers. I thought they were right on. You know, Sammy Davis called them Blue Eyed Soul Brothers, and I thought he was right. So, yes, I know that I'm black. I know that I create from a certain perspective. But I am still entitled to have great appreciation for the Ghent altarpiece in Belgium. I think I am still entitled to Marvette Monet's Water Lilies at Giverny in the city of Vernon. And I think that I'm entitled to appreciate Catholic Horwitz's energy or the work from Picasso. But I also feel connected to Charles White, Elizabeth Catlett, John Wilson, Diego Rivera, Wilfredo Lam, Manuel Mendive in Cuba, who's a dear friend of mine. So I just didn't want to, I'm happy if I can be an example. And I feel that I try to pay it forward with all my students. But I remember what Ralph Waldo Emerson said, and I believed it when I discovered it at 11 years old, and I believe it now.
Yes.
A scholar reads in all books.
Yes, but I think that art is universal. I just turned this on. Is it on? Okay. And art is universal, yes. I was just talking to Francine earlier today, and I thought there are two other shows here, and if you haven't gotten a chance to see them, please do. Donna Maria Bruden on next door in one side of the room, and Fabulous, and George O'Keeffe on the other side. And what I said to Francine, and what I love about what she did, was how she forced a comparison. She forced a conversation, and probably a conversation that would not normally happen. And I don't think it's ever an either-or situation. I think we artists, as artists, we embrace art. It doesn't matter who's making it, you know, because it informs us. It informs all of us, not just artists. But it also sets up different kinds of challenges. It creates conversations that we may not have otherwise. And so, and I have to say also, MoMA did this earlier. It's not there now, but they had Picasso's de Mademoiselle d'Avignon next to Faith Ringo's Die. It was a different name earlier when she made it. But next to that was Faith Ringo's Die, forcing a different kind of conversation between those two artists, different generation, different time, different intent. But yet, as we look at it in 1922, or 2020, all right. Yeah. But as we look at this work, do this comparison in 2022, given, I guess, a lot of the issues that the country, national issues that the country is going through, and the kind of conversation that we're having today, I think it's really important that we kind of come outside of ourselves to look at things differently, to have these challenged conversations.
I think that's a good thing.
Hold on one sec. So I
want to talk about that Picasso piece.
Yeah, no, it's my favorite painting. Whenever I'm in New York, it's on the 5th floor of the Museum of Modern Art. I have to visit this piece. I think, in my view, this is Bob Dilworth's view, that it is the most perfect painting. It cannot be edited. It cannot be edited. In other words, nothing can be taken away. Nothing can be added. I cannot say that about every painting. Nothing can be added. Nothing can be taken away. It is exactly the way it should be. But also, the fake Ringgold piece, Die. You must see it. Well, they're on different floors now. I was really disappointed when I went to New York in June, July, to see that Picasso has been moved to a different place, fake Ringgold is in another place, because I enjoyed having that conversation with myself in those two pieces. But I'll let you.
Yeah, before that, Alfred Barr had gone to Europe, and he was speaking at this time with a German artist by the name of Max Beckmann. And Max Beckmann had been telling him that he thought Matisse was a very decorative artist and therefore not so important. And he thought that Picasso was just too silly. He said he was too playful. I think those were his exact words. That's been
Beckmann said that?
Beckmann said Picasso was just too playful, not serious enough. And he said, if you think I'm kidding, put us both in the same room. And so Alfred Barr purchased The Departure, and that for many years was the painting, that triptych that was opposite of La Demoiselle d'Avignon. And so, yeah, so when you brought that up, I thought that Beckmann himself wanted to have a different dialogue with that piece, but they're both Europeans. The difference, one was Spanish by way of France, or French by way of Spain, and the other one's German by way of the Third Reich. So it was a very difficult kind of thing. But looking at hard issues and trying to make poetry of it, that has always been, first and foremost, the thing that stood out as something to try to accomplish in my work. And I always thought that it was okay to be both a poet and a warrior. But at the time when I did the things I was doing, I was attacked by some people in the media, but mostly by certain black people, by saying I had abandoned the struggle of some sort, and that I had lost my freaking mind and was painting trees now in Berlin. And I said, damn, a brother can't make a love poem to Autumn? So, I mean, that's all I was doing. And I was wondering if Monet had caught the same kind of hell for painting little flowers on lily pads, but I don't know if that conversation ever happened, And then some of the people in the museum culture, the white museum culture, they said my work was not Afrocentric enough, and African Americans saying it was too Eurocentric. So I was kind of catching hell from both ways, but luckily the people decided, and they purchased what they purchased, and the museums collected what they collected. And later, I was able to have one of my patrons, and I don't want to embarrass him, but they purchased $1 million of my prints and donated it to 10 historical black colleges and universities for prosperity. So, thank you so much. Dr. Taser. That sort of locked down a bit of a legacy. But mark making is a very important thing, visceral surface, a chance to sort of exercise demons, to give location to a work of art, and to feel that my story is as important as any other story. And that's the real important thing, that our story and my story and your story, that you can feel like you can approach it without asking for permission. And so that's what I've tried to do. Dr. Pamela G. Taylor at Virginia Commonwealth said that Joseph Norman takes ugly things and make them beautiful. So that's what I have tried to do.
And thank you both for that conversation and that comment. I think that was kind of exactly one of the things I was thinking about with the mark making question was the assertiveness on the page, like the assuredness that this is worth looking at and this will require your time, which is for me one of the common threads that I've seen throughout some of those artists. And I also just wanted to maybe a quick comment on some of the dialogue we were having. It really just brings to mind, I think Bob made this point as well, that this sort of dialogue being an ongoing thing within the context of, African American artists. I'm thinking back to Du Bois's criteria of Negro art. I'm thinking back to Langston Hughes's The Negro and the Racial Mountain, which I still, expose students to, the sort of grappling with these questions. And I think that it is the tension that we sit in which can be generative and productive, because I think from that tension emerges different creativity, different practices, and I think even from folks like to Larry Neal to moving on, I think every generation, I think attacks this question in one way, and I think it's really productive and exciting. Really, I think that this conversation will be great for a lot of students to also think through and kind of come at and be privy to. So I just wanted to say that a great conversation can come from art making, right? I think we had a conversation that starts with art making, take us. And I did maybe just want to bring it back to up here, Joe, and really just continue to listen to you. Why I wanted to start with this one, or make sure we got to it, was I really, speaking about the assertiveness and the assuredness, was that for as much as there's all these different things converging, it, to me, is context of every decision. And I think it's just that sense of, as you just said, this is worth looking at, this is worth your time, this convergence, this combination, the different worlds are coming together, and sometimes they overlap and sometimes they diverge. But maybe just talking to us about this one in general, but just that assuredness that you spoke about, that sense of knowing that this is something.
Yeah. So when you grow up in a inner city, there's so many obstacles. So this picture has a lot of obstacles. But there are several and barriers. There are fences and things like that to keep you in or keep you out. But there's the stairway that leads somewhere. And there's a portal there to the left. And it's like a landscape if you see it. And I took that from Leonardo's Serpentine Curve that you find in the Mona Lisa. There's this device used to take you away. So I've always tried to have some blue sky, some optimism. How do I get out of here? If I can just climb up this tree, I can get that ladder, and I can get that opportunity there. But along the way, there's a whole bunch of kind of pitfalls. They used to do illegal dumping. That was not a term back in the 60s. So one day, my friend said, they done dropped a beach across the street in the vacant lot where we play ball. I said, they did what? They done dropped the beach. And I said, we got a beach? They said, yes, it's across the street. So I said, Mama, could I go to the beach? And she said, where's the beach? I said, it's across the street. She looked up, but don't go far. So later, we're running and throwing each other in this sand and all this kind of stuff. And we're just having a blast. We finally got a beach. And then years later, I found out that sand had been used to clean up industrial accidental spills. So the fact that weeks later we were all glowing in the dark and everything, couldn't explain it, Touch your hair and say, wow, I don't know what that is, but that's new. And this is what would happen. They would just dump things in the neighborhood, and then we'd play on those junk heaps. Because we didn't, have a lot of access to things at that time. But for us it was okay because we used our imaginations. But barriers and dreams deferred, obstacles, but with little things saying that if you just do the right thing, if you just stay clear of something, there is a clear path to somewhere special. Quickly, I remember watching an all-star football game once, and I was so depressed because I had just discovered that we were poor, and and I didn't know how to get unpoor, and I was trying to figure out. But the all-star game used to be held in Hawaii. You remember that, Joe? They always had the all-star games in Hawaii, and at that point, I remember they were talking to black players, white players, and it was so freaking optimistic. And then I said to myself, okay, what I gotta do is figure out how do I get in there? And in there just simply meant into that mindset, into that dream. How do I get my piece of Hawaii, of that optimism of looking forward? And it was that moment in maybe 1967 that I decided I was going to be somebody, and I was going to give up the streets. And my friends had just kicked me out of our little street gang, and they told me, I asked them why, and they said that I had a chance to be somebody and they didn't. And that was the turning point for me, and I turned to the straight and narrow, and for the most part, you know, didn't break the law again. I can't go, what happens in Canada stays in Canada.
That is funny.
So do we have another word?
Yeah.
I also want to talk about, you mentioned something earlier that really struck me, and I think that one of the things that I see consistent in the show is decision-making more than mark-making. I mean, you know, we can talk about mark-making, but I'd much rather talk about decision-making, because I think the decision-making is what's really, in my mind, driving a lot of the excitement and the dynamics of the work, and that is the decisions that Joe makes. I mean, you have to look at every piece of work, and you see that in every work, you know, the works on the screen, but the works particularly on the wall, Joe's mind is always making a decision. How dark should this be? How light should it be? Where are the lines going? Are the lines going? Are the lines going? Are they curved lines, zigzaggy lines, straight lines, so forth and so on? After he has made a decision on the topic that he wants to address. So there's all of this, you know, decision upon decision, layer upon layer upon layer of decisions that he's making. And that's what makes, in my mind, the works complex. So we can talk about, you know, mark making, but I think that's academic. It's actually 101 class, and you know, that's wonderful. I'm not trying to belittle it at all, but I would like to talk about the complexity of the work and how Joe brings it to advanced stages of complexity. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just wanted to maybe, you know, to pick up on that, just kind of wanted to start us.
Yeah. Look.
Yeah, I know, Bob.
I'm not complaining at all.
No, I'm disagreeing with you. I know you mentioned you wanted to talk about this one behind us, so I was thinking we can maybe go to that now.
Okay.
Yeah, just really turn it over to you if there's any particular.
Well, yeah, this is about Emmett Till and the death of Emmett Till, but it's also about, you know, when we think about Kafka's metamorphosis and turning into a bug and sort of like trying to, like when you looked at Emmett Till, like he didn't look like the same boy that he was, obviously, after that incident. It was very difficult. And when you examine, you know, the metamorphosis by Kafka, you know, there's this whole evolution to a very hard life, to very difficult moments, and it all leads to this one moment, and then, you know, this conversion, transformation. And I thought about this young man in 1955. He's down south, and he's accused of eyeballing, goggling, or something, looking at a white woman. What is it? Gawking. Okay, but it was another one my mother used to say. Anyway.
I like that word.
But she also taught me, and I don't know what. So, yeah.
That's a good word.
So it was trying to understand those types of things.
Yeah.
And how many different ways can you say the same thing and keep it fresh? So sometimes it's the challenge of trying to elicit a thought where you're making constant changes and decisions, trying to bring a thing into focus, trying to balance a thing, throw it purposefully off balance by making a decision to do something, and then how can I find my way back out of it? Now, this kind of improvisation happens in jazz, of course, and Miles Davis constantly complained about, I think it was John Coltrane, taking very long solos and taking a long time to get back to the point, but he often said that that's what it took to get there. So I just sort of employed that. I remember there was when they talked about building the Great Wall of China, when the architect or the engineer went to the emperor, he simply said to the emperor, "I have one brick left and all skills have been exhausted." So I try to exhaust all skills when I work, and that's why I work in series and sometimes suites where I can just keep revisiting the same theme to keep my mind active and I don't know when to stop. So I stop when all my skills have been exhausted. And then I say, I guess I'm done with that. And that's what I do. It's no more complicated than that. You know.
Well, I really love what you were doing from Franz Kafka's Ruminations on Metamorphosis and how you connected it to religion, fish, transformation, and then you connected that to Emmett Till, what happened to him, and the fact that he was thrown in the water.
Yeah, that's where the shells and things like that.
And the water being a part of this symbolic metamorphosis, bringing in the whole religious idea as well. And then Emmett Till, in his own way, and this is what you're doing, is changed.
Yes.
And almost what I was thinking that in this maybe more poetic way, he was transformed into a saint, or this sort of religious figure.
And that's due to his mother saying that it's going to be an open coffin to show to the world, versus hiding it or cloaking it through some type of formality.
Right. But getting back to this idea of decision making, this is a decision that you sort of emphasize, in my mind at least, in this work, of how you have taken this thought of metamorphosis, transcendence even, if you will, and connected it to this much bigger story. And this story being a story that we all know about, it's not just about your experience, but the one that we all know.
Well, let me point a couple things out.
It's really beautiful. It's a beautiful piece. Each piece, each square, I might say, we're looking at back here. It's beautiful in itself, but collectively, it's a beautiful work.
So how I generally work, like if you notice top shelf, fourth image in.
Top shelf, fourth, got it.
Yeah, shoelaces, just like I just thought about shoes that day, so I'm thinking about that.
Yeah.
So if you come, go one row over and go down 3. Somebody said to me, well, you could do that, but it's hard to do sort of hard edge kind of something in the piece. So that would be the 3rd row left, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can't add an architectural element when you draw. And so I thought of the Chrysler Building, and I just that was inspired by the Chrysler Building, like that at the top of the Chrysler Building, and that's where it came from. And so this guy who worked with me was this hippie guy, and he had these really poorly worn out shoes and things like that. And so I would just look at his shoestrings or something about what was going on that day. I was in British Columbia, so I passed by the water all the time. I passed by gardens. I passed by a zoo. and I would just see all these types of things, and then when I get to the studio, I start this stream of consciousness and working and things like that. And that's where this came from. There were no preliminary studies or anything like that, but I previously, through the Strange Fruit series, had done a series of fish and heads. So I just eliminated the body and brought in the shells for the sea, the symbol of the fish as the Christ figure or as a saint, and other little things like that, like the skeleton, those representing death. The bottom fourth figure from the left is death, and the first figure, third row from the top right, it represents death. And so I sort of did that a few times in there, but I did that for me. It was the dialogue I was having with the work at the time.
Yeah, thanks for that. We could maybe go to, I know at one time, so I just wanted to make one more comment on the scarecrows, and then we can maybe open up for questions. Because I was really thinking with this conversation, like James Baldwin's Take Me to the Water, for example, right? Yes. Thinking about baptism. Yeah. And really what I'm thinking about in this conversation, honestly, I've been thinking about Baldwin a lot, being up here and thinking about the tensions between sort of blackness and citizenship, is sort of like how you work out being in this place and how you come to a sense of self. And Baldwin had a quote about witnessing, and he said he thought of himself more than anything as a witness. I mean, if you think about James Baldwin, he outlived so many of his contemporaries, older and younger than him. And I think in Baldwin's life, we kind of find this trajectory of these tensions between blackness and Americanness, and how we are constantly in that, I guess what Du Bois would call striving, to become a part. And I know that you take up witnessing in this series, and so for Baldwin, he said, I'm a witness to whence I came and where I am, a witness to what I've seen and the possibilities that I think I see. And I was just thinking, as we kind of bring things full circle, what does this idea of witnessing that you take up really so poignantly in these pieces mean to you? What are you a witness to?
Right? There was a documentary recently about James Baldwin. It says, I am not your Negro. And I clearly see myself as myself. I am not America's Negro. That's another guy. And I remember listening to a lecture he gave at Harvard, and throughout this whole documentary, where he's trying to define his self, his authentic American self, but he's also trying to make people understand that nobody's going anywhere. Everybody has sort of settled into being some version of an American. And the sooner we kind of look at this collectively and examine the thing that's in front of us, that none of these problems are going to ever be solved. And we're going to keep revisiting them and revisiting them and revisiting them. Desmond Tutu said the same thing, and in some sense, sort of Mandela. So what I try to do with these pieces is talk about very important things. Now, Dr. Chazen had a book called Shazam, and in a conversation, he talked about living in Birmingham during the time of the bombing, where the 4 little girls perished. I believe that's right, Joe, right? And he was barbecuing, and the grill was shaken by the blast. I mean, how much more witnessing and how close you can be to an incident and be a part of history in that moment than that moment. Not understanding the cause and the effect that's going to happen there. So this picture to the left is my ideal of a mangled child. It is her ghost. And you see her cute little hair. Black women always put barrettes and curl the hair and twist it and tie the knots and things like that. My sisters were like that. And they wore all sorts of fun clothing. They, as a child, I tried to tilt her head so that she's playful. She has a sad face and her eyes stare questioning. Again, with the mark making, with the sort of scarification, the top of her head is missing. I just don't put a brain in there because I don't want to be that gross or that kind of thing. But you see it's missing things. So she is fractured. She is fractured from the history of her family now, that she will never be a woman. She'll never have a woman's hips, but I gave her some. You see? I gave her some. But she's still bound. She's tied down there. And I gave her an assortment of clothing for the afterlife, not unlike the Egyptians, what they would do. But look at that sad face.
As much as I love Baldwin, and I love Baldwin, but I think if we're going to talk about witnessing, we should look at Toni Morrison.
Okay.
We should look at Alice Walker. We should look at Zora Neale Hurston.
Okay.
We should read Sula. We should read The Bluest Eye. And when I see these, I see those characters.
Okay.
I see the Song of Solomon. I see.
Well, I love Zora Neale Hurston, so she was one of my favorite writers from that period.
As much as I love Baldwin, as much as I love many black writers, Richard Wright, that list goes on.
But he overlapped the three great giants of that period, Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X. He knew each of them, so well, and they loomed so vivid during this particular period of 1963. So that was my connection. But I do agree with you.
I get it. But I think when we're talking about witnesses, witnessing. I, really strongly feel that black women writers right now are really doing an incredible job. If we're talking about witnessing, we really need to read the mind of the black female. And when you do these remind me. I had to reread Sula. I had to reread The Bluest Eye.
Yeah.
Please do that. This is where this could be the cover of those novels. They're gripping, they're dynamic, they're not easy to read, but that's what I see.
Well, take the picture to the right. Okay. A nice Jewish boy goes to Mississippi. He's a freedom rider. And so I said, if I'm going to continue to examine the subject of scarecrows and or lynching, because you see they're tied down, they have, when slaves used to try to escape, they would put these harnesses on their necks so they would either make noise when they run or get entangled as they move through the forest. So if you notice, this kid is dressed like a young man from that period, a hippie. And they were accused of being hippies, but they were really like socially conscious young people, and they dressed mod, as we called it. And they were Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner. And it was two young Jewish boys who went missing, and one African American. I think they made a movie called Mississippi Burning based off that. So I thought, if I'm going to continue this series, I got to find ways to keep connecting it to a real subject. So here, 4 little girls, and here the 3 civil rights freedom riders. And again, with the mark making, with the limbs missing, with the hood over the face like a scarecrow. It's very formal in a sense, trying to balance it. So at some point, I let the rational go and the literal go, and then I try to just deal with an exact emotional kind of response to the subject. And so I have variations on that theme, I have variations on this theme, and also the Scottsboro boys, which my dear friend Larry Sykes' father testified in that trial. So I attach some type of significance to a subject and then try to be as serious with it and playful and poetic as possible. So, but that's my take on it.
And in the spirit of Cola Brigla, speaking to Toni Morrison, perhaps if we could all see ourselves more clearly through the spirit of this conversation. And that's really one.
I like Tony's writing. She's great. What's not to like?
I think
Genius Award.
I just wanted to name the point I think that was brought up is that as we kind of bring this full circle and think about these traditions, I think we're at a moment where young Black artists, and perhaps to some of my students or our students who may see this, that there's a really exciting, I think, moment of people really expanding their sort of spaces and opportunities for who gets to be in these spaces, in these conversations. And I think that we all, at least for me, like staying in the tradition of, Black artists and artists of all genders, of all orientations, of all ways of life. And I think Morrison in particular, I just wanted to close with the comment about Lewis. I bring particularly to mind like Cola as a character, and I think what I feel like though your work invites us to see, to see ourselves, to see each other, and what are we reflecting and what is reflecting to us. So thanks, I'll stop there. I know we're over, but thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, you were wonderful.
I think we're going to take questions from the audience now. Anyone have any questions?
We got questions? Oh, yeah.
We got one here.
Joe, being in Georgia now, I was wondering if you're aware that two Newport stained glass artists did the installation and artwork of the